Afternoon. Welcome to this webinar where we're going to talk about the ISTQB Foundation course, the latest version 4. So I'm John. I'm a principal trainer at TSG Training. I've been involved in ISTQB's deliveries since they started back in 2006. I think I did my first pre-ISTQB, the old ISEB BCS qualification. I used to teach that. I think from about 2001 onwards. So I've been involved with this particular qualification, delivering it from its inception. So what I want to talk about in this afternoon session is I'm going to give you some background to the drivers and rationale and reasoning why the syllabus has been changed. And I'll talk you through some of the design briefs, some of the intentions of what the new syllabus should do. And I'll talk you through how the approach was taken to merge two completely different syllabi, the foundation course with the Agile Foundation course. And then I'm going to go through in a bit more detail what has actually changed in each of the sections of the syllabus. And then I'll clarify there's nothing actually new, but I'll clarify the exam format. And then if you've got any questions, I'm happy to tackle those. So if you don't mind leaving your questions till the latter part of the session. Then let's start by talking about the change. So why actually change the syllabus? So ISTQB have been polling feedback and trying to get feedback about the qualifications over the years, and the feedback that has been kind of building up about the current foundation is that to a certain degree it's a bit outdated. We're talking that this syllabus was originally written in 2006. It's not particularly aligned to Agile. Some people said it's too theoretical. Doesn't always do with the practice people using in the day-to-day work. And at the time it was written, and if we go back to 2006, the foundation is very much aligned to the test analyst, test manager types of roles. So people who are full-time testers, that's what they're mainly doing. It was perceived by people that was, to some people, that was one of the problems they had with the foundation. We were emphasizing things that weren't always aligned to the way they were experiencing things in day-to-day practice. So because of that feedback, ISTQB then decided to do some market research and find out, well, what are people looking for in the testing role? What does the marketplace ask for? And the commonality in people looking for testing, people involved with testing roles, they were looking for people with a critical mindset, with the ability to think analytically, but much more these days, the emphasis on being able to collaborate with other people, but also to be able to have that independence, that objective, separate, dispassionate view of what's going on in the software behavior. But people to have a focus and understanding, appreciation of quality. But back to that collaboration, more and more these days, people looking for team players. But also, most job postings were also looking for people with some form of external qualification, certification. And that's where ISTQB's scheme is incredibly successful. There's been over 1 million people certified by ISTQB since the scheme was launched. So with that in mind, one of the other things that was done in the survey is ISTQB looked to see, well, what are you? How are you working at the moment? Well, what are the types of projects? Now, you'll note, if any of the testers, if you add this up, you'll see that the total is more than 100% because people could respond in more than one way. But you can see here, 79% respondents said they're working in an agile manner. 43% said they were working sequential. So that's probably more of those are working in hybrids. But agile is pretty much a mainstream activity now. And it was important that the syllabus still recognizes, although agile is important, sequential is still around there. It's still common. A lot of people working hybrid approaches. And what's quite clear when everybody gets together and talks about testing, we're quite clear. We all understand what we need to do to get testing and quality assurance to work well. But because of these differences in the way people operate and the way organizations operate, there's no worldwide definition these days of what we mean by a tester. Now, the old test analyst role isn't as prevalent in the way people organize and arrange projects these days. Likewise, the role test manager isn't as prevalent as it was back in the days when the syllabus was first formulated. So with this in mind, ISTQB came to the decision that they had to look at quite a radical overhaul of foundation. So the design brief was not an incremental update. So previously, I mean, the first syllabus was launched, I think it was 2006, and then we've had 2009, 2011, 2018. There have been incremental updates. We've changed, or not we, the syllabus team have changed various aspects, but kept the core of the syllabus pretty much consistent. So the intention here was to go for not just an update of chapters, but a complete critical look and rewrite of every chapter in the syllabus. So what they wanted to do, the overall, is to come up with a qualification. I don't mean a standard in the more formal definition standard, but setting the kind of baselines for the art now of software testing, and that this was to be a qualification and a course of instruction and education that is related to people who aren't necessarily full-time testers, anybody who's doing testing, any kind of testing activity, and to correspond to all types of testing activity. But at the same time, looking at the marketplace and appreciating the time out of the office that's required for people to do formal training, update the syllabus, but keep it within the current 3-day teaching study time frame. So get it up to date, but keep it in the same kind of window of delivery. And that's quite a challenge in a way, because we're talking here about, by aligning things with agile practice as well, this is merging together two separate syllabi. Now, the existing Certified Tester Foundation course, a 3-day course, but also the Agile extension is a 2-day course. So that's looking at 5 days worth of current content and getting it into a 3-day course. When on the foundation course, we've got a standard pattern we've been using since 2006, fundamentals of testing, how testing fits in the development lifecycle, static techniques, test management and tool support. But also we've got the Agile Foundation that's looking at agile software development, fundamental testing, agile testing practices and processes and methods and techniques and tools. So what the course design team, the brief for merging the syllabi was take out the basic agile theory. And the reason behind this is that agile's mainstream now. So it's not the purpose of the foundation course to explain agile basics anymore. Merge the duplicated topics. So where it's common to both, just make sure we explain it once. Keep all the elements that are common, but explain them now more as an agnostic, neutral process. So we're not looking at a waterfall emphasis or an agile emphasis. We're just looking at it as a common practice. But also to get away from, or to try to counter that criticism that we were just looking at things from a purist theoretical point of view, try to introduce as many accepted industry practices as possible within the constraints of what's being organized around this 3-day course. So the net effect of adjusting the syllabus was to retain the basic structure of the current foundation. So that 6-chapter structure has been retained. However, in terms of time and emphasis, the fundamentals of testing, we're now spending less time there, but we're going to spend more time on testing through the software development lifecycle. The emphasis on static testing has been reduced, so there's less time there, but there's more time on test and analysis and design. So it's not just test techniques now, and also more time on managing the test activities and less time on test tools. So the emphasis has been changed, and I'm going to go through exactly what's changed in a bit more detail. So if we look at the first chapter, fundamentals of testing. So the overall timing's been reduced. It's 175 minutes, 130 minutes. Now, the topics, the main chapters, so what is testing, still there, why is testing necessary, the testing principles, but now we've got more detail and different detail in test activities and test work and test roles and essential skills and good practice in testing. So what's been particularly emphasized and the new topics? Well, testing now has been recognized and emphasized now as a role that anyone on the team does, rather than previously we talked about the role of the tester as a more, or certainly was aligned with more of the old test analyst role. So testing is something anyone in the team are likely to be able to do. So our skill set is a lot more big picture now, and more holistic. So we're overlapping into much more aspects of what's going on around requirements engineering, as well as testing and development and deployment. And that there's a lot more emphasis now on the collaboration. So the people skills, the personal skills, and we're emphasizing less the technical skills and more this whole team approach. Again, collaboration and collective working is much more the industry practice nowadays, rather than a dedicated tester just doing the testing as a bespoke, specific, precise role. So a bit of de-emphasis on the first chapter, a bit less time, but some new topics and new emphasis. Now, chapter 2, testing throughout the software development lifecycle. It's the same title, but now we've got an additional 30 minutes. We're testing in the context of development lifecycle, test levels and test types, maintenance, although the headings look similar. We're now looking at the impact of the development life cycles on test activities, both the sequential and the agile. And also we're looking at the modern approaches to testing now. Is we're much more interested in defect avoidance rather than purely defect detection. This helps get quality certainty more confidence that we're going to get the quality right. That's precisely what I mean by that. We're also introducing now the test first approaches. So we're going to give you an overview of all the main test first approaches at a high level, and also the emphasis on shift left. And we're going to introduce you to DevOps from a collaboration and a communication perspective. And in looking at this development process and testing's alignment with it, we're also now looking at the use of retrospectives. So there's some more time there to look at the more collaborative and defect avoidance side of things. Now, chapter 3, the static testing, same title. We've got a reduction, so less time here, but we are concentrating a little bit more on feedback mechanisms. So how static testing fits into improving and again avoiding defects. And chapter 4, now that there's an extra hour now, so this again additional time. So the time that's been de-emphasized from static testing, some of this has been now moved into chapter 4, which is no longer called test techniques, and now we're looking at test analysis and design as the activities. So we've got an overview of techniques, we've got the black box and white box techniques, we've got experience-based techniques, but we've now also got more emphasis and more detail on collaboration-based approaches. And when it comes to new topics and new emphasis, though, there's a new emphasis or a change of emphasis now in terms of the technical testing. So whereas in the past we looked at statement and decision testing, now we're going to look at statement and branch testing, which is much more consistent with the way developers look at code structures. From the brought in from agile and common collaborative practices, we're now looking at also introducing the writing of user stories, the writing of acceptance criteria, And we're going to go in collaboration and respective. We're going to look at acceptance test development in a bit more detail and how the writing and the writing stories acceptance criteria fit into the acceptance test development approach and the testing input into that. So we've got more now in chapter 4, and more that's relating to common practice. Probably the biggest change is chapter 5. Now, this has had a substantial increase in time. And again, we've taken this away from the title test management, where in the past we were talking about the role of the test manager and how that's separated from the tester. Now we're looking at this as the team collaborative effort. So managing test activities, test planning, risk management, test monitoring, test control, test completion, configuration management disciplines, defect management. So it might look on the surface, well, that's not that different to what we had before. But in terms of new content, then we're now looking at test management as this group, collective, squad, team, group, collaborative, collective activity. And we're looking at, we've got more detail now on the mechanics of configuration management of our test assets and test work. And we've got specifics now about release planning and about iteration planning, and a lot more specifics and a lot more K3, so practical, both application and practice in estimation techniques. So we've now got 5 specific test estimation techniques that we're going to go through, give you some practical experience in. They will be translated in the exam into K3 questions. So chapter 4 and chapter 5, we've got a lot. There was always a heavy emphasis on practical in K4. We've now got a lot more emphasis on practical in K4, in chapter 4. We've now got significantly more practical emphasis in chapter 5. And we've also brought in from the Agile Foundation the use of the testing pyramid and the testing quadrants to help communicate and synchronize our work. So something's got to give a little bit when it comes to adding this new detail in. So the other area where we've got a reduction in time is tool support for testing. So we've got tool support for testing and benefits and risk of test automation, slightly less time and slightly less detail. But we are now bringing in an introduction to DevOps tools and the use of collaboration tools. So that's in the time frame I'm trying to work with it without getting bogged down to its detail. That's essentially what's different, what's changed, what's been added, what's been re-emphasized. Now, the exam itself, that is the same format as it was before. So it's still a multiple choice exam, 60 minutes, 40 questions, 26 out of 40 is 65% score to pass. Now, obviously, this is going to be, the exam questions now are aligned to the new learning objectives. So, as I mentioned, we've got a lot more K3 questions in there around chapter 5. And the way we're addressing that in the course is what we've always done in our foundation courses. We've got plenty of practice. So as we go through the course, we are giving you exposure to exam style questions, both in the classroom and in the homework and in detailed debriefs to help you both understand how to apply it practically, but also to help you with your exam technique. So that's a brief overview of the new course aligned to the new syllabus. And I'll now open the session up. So anybody got any questions?
Hi there, it's John here. I've got a quick question, which is, have you any
Hi, John. I can see your microphone, but I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, okay.
Can you check your audio settings in Zoom?
Zoom ratio.
Or you could always send use the chat if that's not working. So I sounds like I'm not hearing you. So Judge, any idea why some of the test techniques are now more complex? It's not so much the techniques are more complex. If the techniques, equivalence partitioning, boundary value analysis, state transition testing, decision table testing, they're not more complex. They're just that the syllabus has put more realistic examples in. So things like the equivalence partition was quite simplistic before. So it's introduced the idea of constraints, because often when people use things like equivalence partitioning, then constraints are more one of the things you'll typically have to think of when putting together test sets. So again, the intention here was to make the techniques more realistic in practical use. Does that answer your question, John? Well, if I told you that if you look at test analysts, that's gone into even more detail. So it's just bringing the techniques into more aligned with practical problems. If that makes sense. Again, some of this was back to the feedback that sometimes we were being too simplistic and too theoretical. So the syllabus team, when it comes to applied techniques, they're not raising the difficulty, I think, hugely in the techniques. So they're just presenting and forcing us also in our training materials to give you more realistic examples. Anybody else got any other questions? Well then, if there's nothing else for you that you've got to ask of me, then I'm going to say, first of all, thank you very much for taking time out of your lunch to listen to me. I hope this has been useful for you, give you some insight into what's new about the foundation. And thank you very much. You're very welcome. Thanks.